we all understand the type of climate that we're dealing with. We're dealing with multiple offer situations.
I'd love to know sort of what's your why? What makes you tick? Why are you so successful?
Have a dialogue with your lawyer. Have a dialogue with your agent.
Both sort of passionate about sort of what we do.
Again, vet your agent to make sure that they're experienced and they're local. I like that idea.
No excuse to miss it on Saturdays from 8 to 9.
That's right.
WBZ.
And now, the show that gives you the latest and most relevant housing market news. Real Estate Radio Boston with financial expert Rick Shearer and legal professional Ali Alavi.
Here's some of the myth busters out there, guys, ladies, gentlemen, is that the process of going through a refinance is not as complicated and complex as going through your purchase. So get rid of all those memories of having to submit everything under the sun as far as getting your refinance in order. And it will. How long would it take you, Rick, to be able to tell them whether it makes sense for them to refi or not?
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
So 20 minutes of your time is well spent for you to realize and for you to be able to make an assessment as to whether you're going to be able to save a couple of $100 a month or not. That's a time well spent.
And I was talking with a financial planner over the weekend, and he's like, I'm sitting in the high fours. But I just, I know we're going to sell in a couple of years, and I just didn't want to pay the closing costs. I think so many people out there think that they need to pay closing costs in order to refinance because they paid so much when they purchased. It's not the case. We do no points, no closing costs refinances, and I'm telling a gentleman that educates people day in and day out about finances. He didn't know that, so I can't imagine. The average people think, and if you talk to a credit union, talk to a local savings bank, chances are they're not going to pay your closing costs for you.
Exactly.
But when you go to a mortgage lender, they will.
Right.
So if you're out there, definitely make sure you're not paying any closing costs.
And listen, if you've been in your mortgage for 5, 6, 8, 7 years, no one is suggesting for you to reset the clock back to that 30-year term. I mean, Rick, you'd agree with me as a financial planner, as a mortgage planner, you would say, no, don't reset that clock because you've already paid a reasonable amount of principal down for that mortgage.
Right.
Well, there's options for you there as well. I mean, you can get into a 25-year mortgage. You can get into a 20-year mortgage.
You can get into a 26-year mortgage.
Well, there you go.
27-year mortgage. I can amortize from whatever you want, so you're not going backwards and still save all that money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So because you can take advantage of these low rates and not lose that aspect of it.
I mean, one of the big things we do is take an analysis as to what really is at risk. Figuring out what is what have you accumulated? How is it owned? Who owns it? Is it you or your wife? Or what is the scenario? What do you want to leave behind as a legacy, if anything? And then looking at some basic documents to have in place to give the people that you trust and love the wherewithal and the power to make and help you if you become disabled. Those are generally, I mean, again, we talked about this in the past, powers of attorney and healthcare proxy are probably your basic documents so that if you do become incapacitated, we don't need to go to court. We don't need to, sometimes people call it probate for the living. You want to generally avoid that. The court will get involved in your life if you don't have a plan in place to help you with your medical decisions.
Now, Mike, one of the things you do a great deal of is planning for the future as far as Medicare and Medicaid and planning, because you can't just start planning for that right before it happens, correct?
There are things you can do depending upon your status. Are you married? How do you own your home? There are things that you can do. Is there a child living with you? There are things that you might be able to tap into to otherwise protect an asset that you can't for a traditional person. And those things need to be looked at. A lot of people come in and they don't know about what some of the exemptions are. And then time elapses and they don't take advantage of it, and then it becomes too late.
One of the fallacies is that if you put together a will, and in that will you're giving certain powers to your administrator, etc., that is not going to effectuate until the day that you have died. So this is what you're talking about. I really want the listeners to understand the importance here. If you have a will that has given certain powers, those powers are going to be of no consequence if you are disabled, right, Mike?
Absolutely, and that's actually a funny thing. I chuckle myself when people come in and they say, well, I'm mom's executor and mom's sitting right in front of me. And of course, you're not mom's executor if mom's sitting and breathing next to you. So
Right.
Exactly.
you're not the executor until someone passes away.
We wanted to highlight Robin Williams's death, of course, a sad, premature death that occurred. It appears that he put together a very sound estate plan for his wife and children. But as best as I can tell, they're still going to be going to court because there's certain items of dispute. Tell us the details there and tell us what would be the take-home message.
Well, here you have a situation, as Ali explained, is that this is a man who's been married 3 times. He was on his 3rd marriage. His final marriage has been approximately 3 years. Mm-hmm. He had a prenup. He designed this trust for his new wife, in which one of the homes they lived in was going to be available to her, and the expenses were going to be paid for that residence. And here you have a contents dispute and his personal items in his estate. And this is a really difficult item for people to deal with because your personal items aren't divisible like money. You can't just write an equal amount of checks or a percent.
Right.
It's personal items, and people's value to those items is very emotional and unique, and it's simply not cash.
I mean, in this case, you're talking about the suspenders from Mork and Mindy. You're talking about his Oscars, etc. I mean, how do you put a value to that? This is in this particular case, but I mean, the take-home message, I guess, is what would you normally do when you have that little, I don't know, grug that your great-grandparent gave you? What's the value in that? I mean, that's what we're really talking about.
I guess the question is, should you be itemizing all of the things that every person should be receiving outside of just the contents of the home?
Yeah, if something's very personal to someone and means a lot to someone, and you really want to direct that item to that person, absolutely, that's what you should be doing.